Hi guys, this is Erin Stelter and this is my week 3 video discussion. I'm going to start with my case study video report. I had chapter 13, which is about strategy, and just to dive right in, the word strategy comes from the Greek word strategos, meaning general, and this chapter deals specifically with political communication strategy. So he gives some examples of military communication strategy, but that's not what the focus is. It's more like he's talking about political campaigns. He gives a lot of examples of political leaders throughout the chapter, but many of the elements also apply in like a work environment with communication or even your personal communication. So he says that strategy needs to be flexible and able to adjust and adapt. So within a political campaign, different things may come up along the way where you need to change your communication strategy, the way that you're talking to people or the points that you're talking about. You just need to be flexible. And the key elements of strategy are, first, positioning the story, plot, narrative, themes, and messages that a strategy employs. Second, the language used. Third, the sequencing and timing of actions. And last, the targeting of audiences. And then we kind of break those down a little bit. So he says, tactics represent the tools to implement strategy whose deployment is prescribed by the concept of design. And so in this case, strategy is a concept that determines how resources are used in achieving goals. You maximize your strengths and you minimize your weaknesses. And then tactics are a tool you use to implement your strategy. And it is an action or a conduct. So first, you lay a strong foundation for a campaign. And he says communication campaigns require setting a strong foundation. You want to set a goal. You want to give a clear rationale for your goal and your purpose. And you also want to communicate your results along the way so that your audience understands where you're coming from and where you're going. And then the next section is positioning and narrative. And he says, a narrative should define a cause and the stakes, what a policy or action means to an audience. So he says you want to enhance, if you have differences with your opponent where you come out looking better, you want to enhance those differences through your communication. But then if you have differences where maybe you don't come across as good, you want to blur those differences and maybe not emphasize them. And then this is based on the audience. So you need to know how your audience feels about different issues so that you know if you're needing to enhance or minimize the differences between you and your opponent. He talks about how using repetition is really important. Margaret Thatcher was really good at that. But he points out that your actions have to match what you're saying for you to be credible. You can repeat something over and over, but if your actions don't back that up, then you won't gain that credibility, or you'll lose credibility. And your narrative is kind of the story you're creating about yourself, but that focuses on the audience, not on the narrator, which means that you're telling the audience things about you in your campaign that audience wants to hear, not necessarily what you think that you want to tell about yourself. I hope that makes sense. So you have to be, that's part of being strategic, is knowing what's going to be the most effective to tell your audience. So the next section is language, and he says the right language is critical in framing issues. So again, you have to know your audience. The culture of your audience can really affect what the right kind of language is that you need to use we all know you may communicate differently at work than you do at home. You may communicate differently with your friends when you're out than you do at home. So in the same way, like someone in a campaign would need to understand the culture of the audience that they're speaking to know the right kind of language to use, what's appropriate. And timing is also important. That's the next section. He says timing is about when you do what to achieve maximum impact. So if you are delivering a great message, but it's at the wrong time, if it's during the Super Bowl and no one's listening, then you're losing impact. And he also says you need to be aware of your timing so that you can avoid pitfalls, but also so you can take advantage of opportunities as they arrive. You don't want to miss those. And then targeting. Targeting breaks audiences up into smaller groups. And these groups can be broken down into indispensable, influential people, and not indispensable, but potentially helpful people. And then people like a wider group whose support is desirable. And then the last group is people whose support doesn't really matter. And so you're going to target your messages to these different groups. You're probably going to spend more time crafting your messaging to the people that are indispensable and influential. You really want your words to have an impact to them. And then you want to, like I was just saying, gear the message toward the group. So that goes back to knowing your audience so that you know how to gear the message to them. And even if the people whose support is desirable, but they're maybe not indispensable, you still need to know enough about them for your message to be effective when it comes across. And he points out that technology has really impacted targeted messaging, and we know that the more time goes on, social media has played a part, and the internet, all those sort of things have really increased the ability to target. We have more data available about people, so you can really know your audience, and then you have that ability to almost speak what feels like on a one-on-one basis through some of the social media platforms. And then the last section is persuading an audience. Oh, this is not the last section, sorry. Persuading an audience that your cause is more credible. So he says you always make an effort to persuade your audience. Don't just assume that the audience supports you, and don't assume that your opponent's message isn't persuasive. We've seen candidates over the years that, they were a shoo-in. Our last presidential campaign, I think a lot of people went into that thinking that the results were clear, and then people were surprised. And it's continually a surprise every day. So you have to, as he says, always make an effort to persuade your audience. And then mobilizing a target audience. So I thought this was an interesting point. So you persuade your audience to support you, but then the next step beyond that is to mobilize them, and that means to put them into action. So someone on a campaign trail might, speak to a crowd, and most of the people in the crowd liked what they said. They agree with their platform. They're gonna vote for that person, or they identify with them. But to mobilize them would be to put them into action. get them going door to door and campaigning for you, or posting messages on social media in support of you. So it's just taking that next step and beyond support into action. And he points out that audiences are mobilized through social networking. So through social media, through blogging, through the regular media, newspapers, television news. These are the different methods by which your audience can be mobilized. And then the final point, this is actually the final point, is to identify and mobilize credible messengers. And he says, even the most popular political leaders benefit from third-party credibility. And I think it might have been in our last course, one of our books said something about, like, you can say something about yourself, but people are more likely to believe it if someone else says it about you, even if they don't know that person. It just lends credibility. And then the more credible that third party is talking about you, the more credible you appear. So that was it. I thought it was a pretty interesting chapter. I'm actually going to go right into my question and commentary. This last section that was talking about identifying and mobilizing credible messengers made me think of a situation that's happening right now. Many of you know Kendra Horn is Oklahoma's one of our representatives, that she flipped the seat from Republican to Democrat, and from a man to a woman. And so she's representing us right now in the federal House. And anyway, so she's choosing her people that are supporting her. And Catherine Sweeney is a local reporter for the Journal-Record who covers legislative news. And she's actually going to be moved to D.C. to be Kendra Horn's Director of Communications. So Kendra Horn has selected someone to be a credible messenger for her. She's mobilized Catherine Sweeney, who's obviously supported her, but now she's going to act on her behalf and be a messenger for her. And Catherine Sweeney is a very credible messenger. People look to her. She's known for her live tweeting during session. She's really informative. She's also funny. So it's kind of interesting to follow her live tweeting, whereas sometimes it can be dry. So that was a great choice, I think, for Kendra Horn. Although we'll miss Catherine Sweeney's live tweeting during session here. But so anyway, that's my commentary. I just thought that was an interesting parallel to something that's going on right now. And then my question is kind of in this same area where he's talking about audiences are mobilized through social networking, and how things have changed over the years so social media and the internet have made this mobilization simpler. So my question is, have any of you found either mobilized others through social networking or been mobilized through social networking? Like, for example, did you assist in a campaign in some way? Or maybe you can think of another area like work or something else as an example. So that's my question. And thank you all for listening so long. I think my camera's about to cut out, so we're wrapping up just in time. Look forward to watching your videos, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.